Hey guys, welcome back to Real Housewives Recaps. Today I'm covering The Undoing, episode 6, the finale. It's the bloody truth. So much to talk about. I can't believe it's over. I'm actually really bummed because I love the series. Not ready for it to be over. I thought everybody did a fantastic job acting in it. It was just incredible. Really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to talk about it with you, so let's get into it. Hey guys, I just want to take a second and say if you're enjoying this show, please check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search Real Housewives Recaps, or check the comments below and I'll put a link. And for $1 a week, you can support my show and get 4 bonus episodes per month. I'm covering Scary Island, like the greatest season of Real Housewives of New York. So check it out. Thanks so much. Okay, so such a good episode. Oh my gosh, from start to finish. It was just fantastic. I loved every bit of it. I'm not ready for this to be over. So we pick up with finding the hammer. Remember, she found the weapon in Henry's violin case at the end of the last episode, and it was such a cliffhanger to leave off on. So she's, of course, completely freaked out. Grace is. Henry is staring at her. And she's saying, you need to talk to me. And this is where we learn that Henry found it. He found it in the fireplace at the beach house. And she's completely shocked, as was I. They kind of did, the writers of the show did such a good job. They threw out so many theories and so many red herrings, I guess, for who it could have been, including this. It had me thinking, well, did Henry do it? My God, it was Dad covering up for him. And I think some of you guys had left comments kind of the same as well, thinking that it could have been Henry, but nope. Oh, we'll get into that. Okay, so we pick up with Jonathan, and they're in the lawyer's office. And Jonathan is blaming Elena's husband, saying he planted it there. Oh my God. So let's get into this. So we know now. Okay. I almost want to save it to the end, but I'm not going to. Let's really talk about this. We know now, and if you don't know and you haven't watched it, turn this off, go watch it, okay? Because obviously, spoiler, and you want to see who did it. Okay, ready? So we know now that Jonathan did it. So not only is Jonathan completely pathological and psychotic and every other word, sociopath, but he not only killed this girl, he's trying to put away her husband for what he did. So he's trying to say maybe the husband planted it there. He's saying he used to bring Elena to the beach house. Then we got a huge reaction out of Donald Sutherland when Jonathan says he brought Elena to the beach house. Well, I think that was total BS just to cover his tracks. So this was really interesting. This actress here that plays Haley the lawyer was fantastic. She basically has to say, listen, I have no reason to believe this is the murder weapon. I have no obligation to alert the police. She starts suggesting that they will arrest Henry for obstruction of justice, and it will traumatize the shit out of him. Her advice is that you do not turn it over. And of course, Franklin freaks out, and he's like, what? What advice is this? This is not advice. And the lawyer says, now is not the time. We're in the middle of a trial. And Grace says, what should I do with it? And the lawyer says, I can neither advise or instruct you to conceal or destroy. Oh my God. And then Jonathan asks to speak to Grace. And of all things, Jonathan starts to maybe accuse the son. Like maybe he did it. He's pulling this, oh my gosh, act where he's crying and acting shocked. And he's basically accusing his son of this horrific crime. Well, I'm glad he did, because in my head, this is what flipped Grace to realize, oh yeah, he's a monster. I think she already suspected and knew, and then finding the hammer and all this, obviously. But I think that's what makes her do what she does later. Oh, we'll get into that too. So good. Okay, so Henry obviously is pissed because he heard his dad trying to accuse him, and Jonathan's saying, I'm a desperate man. If I survive this, we will be back, talking about as a family. Well, then we see this scene between Franklin and Grace. Franklin says, you've always seen things so clearly. How can you not see this now? She says, I do see. I will fix this. Nicole Kidman, such a good line. I love that. I thought that was such a powerful scene between the two of them. So we see them in the car the next day. The lawyer's advising them. She's saying, Grace, you cannot wince or show any emotion. If she does, the jury will think he's a monster. Versus Jonathan needs to show every emotion. So they walk in holding hands, and I thought that's how Grace was going to do this. I thought, okay, she's obviously turned. She's going to do something to make sure he's in jail when she says she'll fix this. So I thought during this testimony of Jonathan, she'd be wincing, and, you know, he talks about never being abusive, and I thought maybe she could show something to the contrary there. Okay, so, oh gosh, so much happens here. Jonathan's on the stand. He's laying out the sympathy, saying he didn't kill her. We made love. I returned. I found her. And he says he's never been violent. He's the opposite. He's like a healer. Again, going back to what that other doctor said, it plays right into it. He believes himself a healer. He thinks, you know, he's the greatest thing ever. And in even more disgusting moves, he says Miguel, Elena's son, became like a son to him, and that he loves Miguel. And they reveal that he slept in his hospital room during his cancer battle, and it was touch and go, and he laid it on so thick. And all right, I'll admit it, I'm a big old baby. I was crying because I hate that they involved the kids in the cancer. But Jonathan is a monster like I've never seen. It was terrible. So then it's time for cross-examination, and the other attorney is putting up pictures of Elena. And it's revealed that he went upstate New York the next morning. He drove up there. And so the lawyer's like, wait, so where did you go the night you found her? He went home and went to bed. And Grace is having flashbacks, and that's, I think, one of the nights they had sexy time. So that's pretty disgusting, too. Or even the fact that he can remain calm and climb in bed with her. Disgusting. So the lawyer is saying, nope, you fled. And the clothes you were wearing that night, the tuxedo, what became of that? And he says he took it to the dry cleaner on the way to Lake George. And, so disgusting. We see where he was later on washing it out himself. What a monster. So they're leaving, and we see Henry. Henry's crying, looking out the window. Grace finds him, and you can just see the difference in the character. Grace is all about Henry. She wants to make sure he's okay. And I think Henry's finally starting to see. I mean, he's a little kid. He doesn't understand, but he says his dad created all this. And Grace says, what do you think about what he said about trying to fix this family? Do you hope for that? And Henry doesn't really ask. He asks her, do you hope for that? And she says she wants what's best for him. Meanwhile, Grace calls Sylvia, asks Sylvia to go for a walk. I need to talk to you, and I need you to do something for me. So we know something is coming, but when they go on this mysterious walk, we don't get any audio. We just see pictures of them walking together. So you know something's going to happen. Oh, it's so good. I thought this Sylvia was a fantastic character, too. They all are so good. My gosh. Okay. So back at court, there are tons of reporters. So this was a kind of a weird scene. We see his attorney, Haley, stand up and say, at this time, I'd like to call. And she's looking around, and you think she's going to call the detective because he's staring right back. But nope. She calls Miguel Alves. Alves? Oh, God. This part was so hard to watch because they put Miguel up on the stand, and they ask him about the night his mom died. And she's asking what time he went to bed. He goes to bed at 9, and asks about, getting up to get a drink of water or something, and he says no, and he woke up at 6:30. So they're basically showing that it could have been the dad. He could have slipped out and done all this. She brings up about his parents arguing, and did they yell and scream and fight a lot? And Miguel cries and says he doesn't know. And it turns out he told a teacher it was scary when his mom and dad fought. So, again, these writers are so good. Up until the last minute, they're still leaving possibility that it could have been the dad. Nope. All right. So then we see a really interesting scene of Sylvia and the prosecuting attorney in the bathroom together. Not much is said, but there's weird lingering. And if you remember, Sylvia used to work for that attorney. She kind of revealed it in one of the early episodes that she spent, I think she said, a couple summers working for that attorney when she was maybe fresh out of law school or something like that. Meanwhile, the attorney and Jonathan and Grace are meeting, and Elena's husband busts in. And he says, he's basically, how could you do this? Putting his son up on the stand and putting him through this. Of course, he knows he didn't do it, but it makes him seem a little bit guilty because he's being aggressive, who wouldn't, and throwing things around, again, who wouldn't, and just shocking everybody. They have to call the police to restrain him. They talk about the case. Grace says, well, what about, they're talking about who to put up on the stand. And Grace says, well, what about me? And she says, you said I was the most reliable. She says she doesn't believe Jonathan could have done this, and I'm willing to say that. Okay, so here's where it's so interesting. So here's what my brain fills in, is that Sylvia advised her how to do this. Because we find out that by them putting her on the stand, it opens them up for the other attorney to be able to ask all these things that she gets into later, and they can't, strike the testimony? If you're an attorney, you can correct me, but you get what I'm saying. Like, they can't make her stop talking because it's their witness. It's such a good twist. Oh my gosh. So she sells it that she's going to be on Team Jonathan, because even the attorney is hesitant. She's like, no, I'm going to help him. I'm willing to say that he's a healer. He couldn't have done this. And he says, thank you, Grace. And they hug. Meanwhile, we see Grace in bed thinking about Jonathan and hearing her dad calling him a monster. She's thinking about Elena. Then we see Grace on the stand. So we find out of course we know she's a clinical psychologist. She has a PhD from Harvard. That's actually where she met Jonathan. They asked Grace if she knew Elena and Jonathan were involved, and she's open about it. She says, she talks about how difficult it was. She says he couldn't have been, so he explains that they were together for 17 years. She calls him a healer and explains that he's all about preserving human life. I've never observed Jonathan to be violent, not even once. He's a gentle man of empathy. So she starts out in his favor. She's, talking him up and saying it's not within him to do what he's been accused of. So you think, okay, so she's helping him out. Ooh, you guys. Best scene. I keep saying that, but it really was. It was so good. So it switches, and the other attorney comes up. It's time for cross-examination. And Henry is brought up. And the attorney is basically saying, you just want to wave a wand and give Henry his father back. And they talk about confirmation bias, the tendency to see things as your own preconceived notion. And that seems to be what the whole series is about. Because if she's this fantastic psychologist, why didn't she see the signs? Confirmation bias. She thinks he's a good man, so she believes he is. Until now. So the attorney says, you testified to Jonathan not being violent, and brings up him grabbing her by the neck at the beach house. Well, she's still playing her cards close to her chest. She's saying, she was overwhelmed by fear and she wasn't in danger. They play the 911 call. And this is where you know that Sylvia has helped and brought this information to the attorney. The attorney brings up his family, and Grace looks towards Sylvia, and they bring up the incident and him being blamed for the 4-year-old being hit by a car. And she admits that she spoke to his mother, and Jonathan looks shocked. And that the sister got out of the house, and that the tragedy even happened. And meanwhile, Haley, his attorney, is like trying to stop this. She's saying things like objection and trying to stop. And the judge allows it because Grace is a witness for Jonathan. So they get into it, and that's where Grace admits that his mother says that he suffered no trauma. He had no guilt nor grief in his reaction to his 4-year-old sister's death. Oh my gosh. So good. Oh my gosh. And Grace goes on and says she kept waiting for it and the suffering never came. So she gets to drive the nail in his coffin. I don't know how to say it. Like she's there, testifying on his behalf, but she gets to finally speak up and make sure that he'll never be around Henry again and just be in their lives. It's just so crazy. And so it's so interesting. Just the name Undoing takes on so many meanings. It could be her undoing. She becomes his undoing, and even Henry becomes Jonathan's undoing to an extent. So, so good. He's his own undoing. Okay, so let's see. So the attorney asks, what are the traits of narcissistic personality disorder? And Grace says grandiosity and lack of empathy. And the attorney says sometimes you so want to believe in your partner that you choose to unsee things and unknow things. So that's how they explain Grace not knowing what was going on. People being blind to the reality of their spouses. And Grace, and it's such a chilling, great line, says, I know who and what I married. And that is how the scene ends. Go Grace. So good. So good. So Jonathan's attorney moves for a mistrial. Jonathan stands up and says, it's a lie. And we see him kind of lose his cool and start to react. They excuse Grace, and Jonathan stares her down while she walks by. Sylvia smiles, and her dad walks her out. What a powerful scene. We see Sylvia run after her and hold her hand, and it was just such a, I love seeing Jonathan get his, and it finally is catching up with him, and he knows he's doomed. So I don't understand why I understand that he's out on bail, but I don't understand how he's able to go home after this. I don't know how that works. This man should be locked up. It gives me chills. So good. Okay, so back to it. Then we get a scene between Jonathan and Haley, the attorney, and he's saying, she effed us. Then he turns to her and says, you let it happen. And this is where I love the attorney. She says, she was in your camp, but you lost her because you didn't get rid of the effing hammer. How stupid can you get? Whew. So that was a bomb too for me. She knew he was guilty. She knew it. And she's basically pinning it back. I mean, it should be pinned on him. He did it. But I'm saying, she's a lot even tougher than I realized. Talking like that, saying, you're stupid. You messed this up. Such a good scene. So Henry and Franklin are together. And Henry says she took him down on purpose. And Franklin says she could have turned over the hammer, but it could have taken you down too. So let's talk about that for a second. So she could have turned in the hammer, and I understand why she didn't, because she wants to protect her son. But that's the only part that kind of bothered me, is that she didn't turn over the hammer. I understand he ran it through the dishwasher, so there's not any DNA left on it, and I just wondered why that, I guess just to show how far Grace would go to protect her son. That's all I could think. So we see Jonathan, and he's thinking back, and we start to see it. We start to see the real clips of what happened that night. So much crazy stuff. So we see him that night in his tuxedo there to see her, and we see him thinking about the sexy time they had together, and they're flashing back and forth between that night and Jonathan. Well, then we go back over to Henry. He's listening to the news. Betting has stopped, saying Jonathan is guilty. They're saying betting has stopped, and that basically Jonathan is guilty. So then we see text between Henry and Jonathan. And I had to pause it because it was intentionally blurry, but what the text said is breakfast ? Might be our last chance. He wrote back, "Are you sure, Dad?" And we didn't get to see Jonathan's response. Henry just stares off. Meanwhile, Grace and Franklin are walking into court, and as soon as they walk into court, the attorney walks up and says, "Have you heard from Jonathan?" And Franklin says, "Of course we haven't heard from Jonathan." And Grace at the same time gets the most gut-wrenching message. And it says Henry has not shown up for school. And so they decide they need to get the police. So then we go over to the car, and this was the most intense. I keep saying that, but this was so intense. We see Jonathan and Henry in the car together. And at first I thought Henry was running away with Dad. I don't know. I just thought he was mad at Grace for trying to take down Dad, so he purposely ran away. But I don't take that scene this way. He's a kid. He doesn't understand fully. He can't comprehend what all is going on. So he thinks this is the last time he can see his dad. So he thinks they're going to go get breakfast. Well, obviously, right off the bat, Jonathan is acting very erratically. Henry's saying, "We can't do this, Dad." And Jonathan says, "I'm not doing anything. I'm going for a drive with my son." And he's manically smiling, and we see more flashes back to Elena. And Elena is telling him, "Your wife has been so great and so kind, and we have such a great connection," and that Henry could be an older brother to Miguel. And this makes Jonathan snap. He says, "If you go near my family again, I will hurt you. And she says, "You will never hurt me. You will never leave me." So it is interesting that we see this little bit of another side to Elena. Doesn't make what he did right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's just interesting because we do see that she was standing up to Jonathan. And it was interesting to see inside looks at their relationship. I'll just say that. So there's a news report about the alert of Jonathan taking Henry. Grace and Franklin, they decide to get in a helicopter to go find Henry. And we see, again, Jonathan obviously acting completely manic and singing with Henry. We still are getting flashes of Jonathan. I can't show those because of the violence, so we're just going to talk through it here. But we see the most brutal scene of him hitting her against a wall, and she's saying, "You will never leave me." And he says, "Really?" And he hits her so hard that she falls down. And he says, "I just left you." We're back to Henry and Jonathan. Jonathan's talking about fried clams. Henry is starting to realize what's going on and says, "We need to pull over." Jonathan starts to crack, and he starts yelling more. And he yells, and he says, "Sorry, that can happen. We can lose ourselves. We become other. Could be panic, could be love. We become other." So he's justifying what he did to his son. It doesn't undo our entirety. Do you get that? They're going to say that this is my legacy. They can go F themselves, because my legacy is you and your mom and my patience. And Henry says, "You murdered a person, Dad." Oh, this kid is like the best. They're all such good actors, but this kid, to understand the scene and nail it like this was fantastic. To see him realize that, his dad, he knew that his dad did it, but to hear him say it like this, oh, so good. Okay, so we do see flashes back to Jonathan and Elena. And we find out here that she actually started by chasing him with the hammer. And because he was trying to leave her. And this was the most disturbing scene because she goes to stop him and he takes the hammer away and they show it full on how he did it. And he hit her so many times and he kept on hitting her. And we see the monster. So back to Henry, and he's saying again, "You murdered a person." And Jonathan's saying, "Not the real me, not the dad you know." Henry's begging Jonathan to pull over, and he says, Jonathan's saying, "I want every last second with you." And Henry's still asking him to pull over, and Jonathan says, "Shut up." And it gets so scary. I thought, oh my God, he's going to drive this car off a cliff, off a bridge, something like that. Because just because Grace took him down, he's going to hurt Henry. And because he is a sociopath and he has no real feelings, I thought he seems to love his son, but you don't know how much he can feel because of his history. We see this truck come barreling toward them and he barely misses it. Oh, such an intense scene. Grace is absolutely panicked in the helicopter and so worried that he's done something to Henry or is about to do something to Henry. So Jonathan pulls up on this bridge, and again I thought, oh my God, they're going over. Okay, so Jonathan finally, he gets out of the car and he climbs up on the bridge, and Henry still loves his dad. He's holding his hand and he's saying, "Don't do it, don't do it, Dad." And at that time, Grace is able to get out of the helicopter and she goes running full force at them. It was interesting to see Jonathan's look here because he's almost smiling as he sees Grace. And I don't even think that it's that he loves Grace. It's that, he's such a narcissist. He likes to feel wanted or needed or something because Grace is calling out for both of them. My belief is just, obviously everything she does is to save her son. So she thought by calling his name, he would maybe snap out of it and not hurt Henry. But when she gets there, she pulls Henry away. And Jonathan is still thinking he's the center of the universe. And he's like, come here, give me a hug. Come here, Grace. And she walks away from him. She takes Henry and she gets away from him. And that's where we see the cops arrest him. Oh, and that is how the episode ends. Grace and her dad and Henry get to go in the helicopter and Jonathan's being arrested. I am so glad they did not. I was so scared he was going to hurt that kid. And I'm so thankful they did not end the series like that. I'm also so thankful that they didn't end it with him jumping off the bridge. Because that would have been an easy way out. And this MFer needs to suffer for what he's done. So, such a good show, such a good series, such a good finale. You guys have read the book. I haven't read it. I'll probably go back and read it after this. I've heard that it's completely different, so I really want to read what the differences were there and read more about, just kind of get more into Jonathan's personality or personality disorder, I should say, and narcissism, and such a good story. Okay, so that is it. What did you guys think? Were you shocked? Did you see it coming? Were you satisfied with how they wrapped it up? Did you want it to end this way? Are you okay with this? Like, how do you feel? I really want to know. So let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for staying with me through this recap. Man, it was just so good. So I'm always on the look for a thriller like this. I'm on the lookout. So if you have any recommendations, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to cover them in my show, so let me know. And thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving and a wonderful week. And I will be talking to you soon. Check out my other episodes. I'm covering all kinds of shows, so check those out. And thank you guys so much for watching. Take care. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.